He was background traffic until the bride hit his window with the flat of her hand. The sound cut through the heat like a coin on glass. He has this image forever. White dress, stray bobby pins glittering like dropped stars, eyes that had already looked at forever and decided no. She clutched a tiny metal thing, too small to be a phone, too important to be nothing, and said, "Please." Drive Mike Carter had learned the world in shift changes. Morning lift to airport runs, late afternoon brake jobs behind the body shop off Riverside, midnight to 2 a.m. for the drunks and the lost. He lived by timers he didn't set, DoorDash surges, parts deliveries, the power company's postmarks. He kept a thermos of oversteeped coffee that tasted like stubbornness and tin. He drove an older Ford Econoline, white enough to pass as innocent, loud enough under the hood to tell the truth about its age. He knew which streetlights in Austin were actually cameras and which corners the cops liked when the heat made them jumpy. He had 2 rules: keep it moving, keep it quiet. Then she opened the door. He didn't think about the dress. He thought about the hand trembling on the seatbelt and the weight in her palm. Flash drive. He didn't know what it held, but he could smell a story even if he didn't want it. "Close it," he said. He didn't say welcome. He didn't say who are you. He slid the van in gear like it was a prayer. Behind them, the hotel beamed from every window like wealth had a wattage. Fairmont, downtown. The valet looked everywhere but at him. A pair of groomsmen burst out of the revolving door, ties loosened into smirks. One raised his phone and laughed like laughter was a weapon. "Hey!" he yelled, and the phone caught the license plate without even trying. Those numbers would be trending by dinner. He gave it 15 seconds before someone tagged him a kidnapper. He rolled off the curb. The Econoline's steering whined like a complaint, but obeyed. His right glove squeaked against the wheel. The fake leather had cracked along the thumb. The AC pushed air that felt like an apology. The radio was off, always, unless the night needed company. "Seatbelt," he said. She clicked it, hands white around metal. Her hair was half up, half blown apart. Up close, she looked less like a runaway and more like a person who'd been cornered in a crowd. Her veil snagged on the gear shift. He freed it with 2 fingers. "Name?" he asked. "Emily," she said. Then, "I can pay." "Not the point." "What is?" He didn't answer because the light went green, and a black SUV with windows tinted like secrets slid into the mirror. You didn't need to see eyes to recognize a stare. He turned south, put the Marriott between them and the would-be parade, then cut left, then another left. Lazy S-turns to see if the shadow tucked in or overshot. It stuck like gum. He felt his chest change shape without looking like panic. He'd been followed before, by repo guys, by cops, by a man with a smile too tight and a suit too perfect from a life he had tried to leave 10 years ago. He knew the choreography. Check the mirror, lift the foot, keep the space. "What's on the drive?" he asked, because if someone was going to try to take them off the road, he wanted the math. She took a breath that rattled. "Contracts," she said. "Invoices, voice notes, a swallow. Jackson Pierce." The name made the van colder. In Austin, there were tech gods you wanted to emulate and media men you wanted to avoid. Jackson was the latter, with a donor wall to prove the former. Broad shoulders on billboards and foundation gala tables with laughter like ice. Mike couldn't taste the man without tasting the month he lost 10 years prior. It was the month he told a manager named Corinne he wouldn't sign 2 invoices that had a 0 where a 7 should be. It was the month the manager slid a folder under a door and security called him sir without meaning it. It was the month Mr. Carter at Gmail went quiet. It was the month his casing hands lifted a free set of Cobalt bits at Lowe's, $39.99 in a fit of stupid. And a camera said that made him a thief. He didn't tell Emily that. Not now, with the SUV still back there like a promise. He took Riverside to I-35, slipped north, then off, before the frontage road got thick, ducked under a bridge where graffiti made a mural of every sentence the city didn't want in Chamber of Commerce decks. A bus wheezed past. A homeless camp flickered blue with a TV someone had rigged to a generator. The smell of hot tar got inside the van and sat there like a third passenger. "Who's chasing you?" he asked. "His people," she said. "His friends." The word tasted wrong. "He thinks everything is property. The buildings, the air, me." "Not me," Mike said, but the line sounded corny, so he gave it back to the wheel. Her phone buzzed with a message, then another. The screen lit up with names that looked expensively bored. Don't do this, Em. Let me explain. Be reasonable. One said, we can make this go away with a wire. Another, run while you can, see what happens. The last, bring it back, or you'll wish you had. He held out his hand. Phone. She blinked, gave it. He slid it into an empty Doritos bag from under the passenger seat, the foil inside making an ugly crinkle that sounded like salvation. He folded the top twice, cheap Faraday. Then he popped the SIM with a paperclip and dropped it in an empty Altoids tin, where he kept receipts and sometimes a breath mint for luck. You always carry parachutes? She asked. He shrugged. You do this long enough, people bring you their trouble. You learn the shape. He took First Street and cut towards South Congress, where neon signs made promises they actually kept. Pizza, boots, tattoos that didn't ask for permission. The SUV tried to follow and got swallowed by a delivery truck that jackknifed in front of Home Slice like a drunk whale. Good. A minute mattered. They pulled into the back lot of a 7-Eleven where the lights always felt colder than they had to be. He killed the engine. The silence had a temperature. Stay, he said. I need the bathroom, and they're less likely to make a scene if we aren't moving. He stepped into the cold and stretched his shoulders like a man stepping into a storm. The door chimed. A kid at the register watched him with eyes that tracked black customers' hands like a habit. The air smelled like mop water and the last hour of a shift. Restroom? Mike asked. For customers, the kid said, barely looking up. I'll buy something. A pause. A look up and down. The kid tugged at a sign nobody read. Keys are for employees. Mike smiled without his teeth. All good, he said, and bought a coffee that would taste like rust and a pack of gum that promised winter. He used neither. He walked back out, shoulders burning from the small humilities that stack and stack until laughter cracks them open. Emily had her forehead against the window. She didn't look like a bride. She looked like a person who had tried to be honest in a place where every surface was polished to hide fingerprints. He tapped the glass with a knuckle. She flinched, then laughed, short, wrong, at herself. Sorry, she said. You good? He asked. No. Then softer. I'm with you. He wanted to say with you where. He didn't. He flicked his eyes to the street and saw a second black SUV prowl by like a shark that didn't know you could drown on dry land. He put the van in gear. Another timer started in his head. 30 minutes until the wedding party realized she wasn't coming back for a phone charger or a piece of cake. 1 hour until the first exclusive hit the internet. 2 hours until strangers had opinions heavy enough to tip a life. He turned toward St. Edward's, cutting through quiet streets where owls owned the power lines and sprinklers clicked like tiny clocks. He wanted the van anonymous in 100 vans. He didn't make it that far. A police cruiser slid out of the darkness and laid a polite light on the back window, a small ask. He rolled a breath into his ribcage and looked at his hands, where the scars from busted knuckles made lines maps couldn't draw. Don't move, he told Emily. Let me talk. Her fingers knotted in the dress. The cop knocked on the window with a knuckle and a smile. The smile was thin as a receipt. Evening, he said. License, registration. Mike kept his hands at shoulder height. He had practiced this movement like it was choreography, slow, open, palms visible. Reaching, he said. Glove box. He handed over the papers that always felt like a favor he still owed. Is there a problem? Got a call about a possible abduction, the cop said. He said it like a script. His partner's hand rested on the holster like it needed company. The cop leaned in. He saw Emily. He let his eyes travel. He didn't apologize. Ma'am, you okay? Emily met Mike's eyes. He gave her nothing but presents. She looked back at the cop. I'm fine, she said. I asked him to drive. You sure? He said sure, like it could stretch. I'm sure, she said. And I'm not going back. The cop looked at Mike then, a longer look, scanning for threat, scanning for story. He handed back the license. Just making sure, he said. Where you headed? Home, Mike lied. The cop nodded like the word had enough grease to slide on. Okay, drive safe. His partner didn't nod. He stared at the rear tires like he wanted them to confess. Then they were gone. A slow roll, a final look in the mirror, the smear of red and blue making white on the back window when you added them together like math you didn't want. Emily exhaled like that had been a year. How? They don't like looking dumb on camera, he said, and only then realized he had been holding his breath right alongside her. He relaxed. The van did too. The engine's idle smoothed like it was listening. Inset, the wedding kept going without her. Champagne still popped. Someone made a toast that sounded like a threat with polite teeth. Jackson Pierce smiled the way people do when they haven't lost yet. A groomsman posted a video from the valet loop. Bride kidnapping at the Fairmont? It wasn't a question. The algorithm handed out pitchforks. By midnight, the Econoline's plates were in 100 group chats, half of them spelling his name wrong, all of them typing like they were brave. The comments felt like a hot mist, a thing that sticks to skin. Return the bride, dude is sus. Why are these guys always driving old vans? Reward for info DM. A woman with perfect bangs wrote, "This is why luxury venues need better security." An uncle somewhere typed, "Don't be a hero, son," like he owned the word. Mike kept the wheel quiet. He took Riverside again but west, then threaded through backlots until the city thinned like hair. They stopped at a Whataburger on South Lamar because the van needed gas and Emily needed calories. She went inside, wrapped in a hoodie he kept for people who underestimated Texas AC. The cashier gave her the kind of smile you give a bride who looks like she's trying not to exist. He ate fries with his hands. He didn't feel hungry, but his body didn't care about narrative arcs. He poured ketchup in a puddle that made a little heart by accident and wiped it away. "Do I look ridiculous?" she asked, back in the van, balancing a milkshake that sweat under LED light. "You look like you made a decision," he said. "How long can we run?" He hoped the question was plural on purpose. "Long enough," he said. He meant long enough for me to call my sister. He texted Sarah under the table because old habits made you hide, even when it would have been fine. "Journalist mode," he wrote. "Need air." She replied with a pin drop before he could finish. Sarah was the kind of reporter small towns deserved and rarely got. She worked at the Cedar Creek Gazette, where the office smelled like toner and burned popcorn, and where the edges of stories got rounded off by empathy, not laziness. They took 71 out toward Bastrop, where pine trees made green walls, and the sky got bigger. He counted 3 more SUVs between the city and the country. Maybe they were nothing. Maybe they were a current trying to pull them back. His van stuttered on a hill, like a man clearing his throat. He listened. Water temp fine. Oil pressure steady. Belt squeal at idle, not under load. He popped the hood anyway, at a Chevron that had a soda machine from 2009 and a squeaky chip rack. The engine heat hit his face, and he felt like himself again, which is to say he felt useful. "You know what you're doing?" a man in golf shorts asked, as if this were a quiz. Mike didn't look up. "Enough." The man let his eyes travel to the license plate, then the color of the hands in the engine bay, then away. "Good luck with your vehicle," he said, good luck meaning something else. Mike tightened a clamp. The phrase "keep it moving" seemed less like a rule now, and more like a dare. He closed the hood. The heat of it stayed on his fingertips, like he'd picked up a secret. The Cedar Creek Diner had a neon sign that had outlived 2 owners and a jukebox. The AC worked half the time and bragged the other half. The waitress was a woman whose nail polish chipped in little maps. She called everyone Han and meant it. Rachel Hale sat at the corner booth, watching the door like it owed her. Light hit the diamond on her left hand and threw little knives onto the laminate table. Bridesmaid dress under a blazer, hair sprayed into compliance. She waved, casual like the night hadn't broken in half, and patted the seat that faced the parking lot. Control wears many shoes. "Emily," she said when they sat. "Sweetheart." Emily stayed standing. "Don't." Rachel smiled like a salesperson, not a friend. "You had everyone worried. Jackson is beside himself. He might file a report." "Let him," Emily said. Her voice shook on let. Rachel slid a white envelope across the table like a menu. "He wants this to go away. There's an NDA inside. It's generous. Nobody wants to ruin your reputation." Mike removed his cap. He set it on the table, crown down. He watched the door, the windows, the mirrors behind the counter that let you see who was behind you without turning. "He cares," Rachel added, "about you." "He cares about himself," Emily said, more certain now, "and about the properties no one can trace." Rachel's mouth twitched. "You're tired. You get dramatic when you're—" Mike lifted a finger, tiny gesture, enough to halt a freight train in a room like this. Rachel didn't know how to be interrupted. He had interrupted men like Jackson once. It had cost him. Sarah was 2 booths back, journalist slouch, and a ball cap that said a different town. Her camera lens peered through the gap like a coin slid into a slot machine that had odds you could beat if you were patient. Mike felt the timer click. 3 minutes until the deputy finished his coffee at the counter. 10 seconds until the part where Rachel made a mistake big enough to fit a story through. Rachel leaned in. "He can keep you safe, Em. Do you understand what you've taken?" Her eyes flicked to the flash drive, which Emily had tucked into the hem of the hoodie like a saint's relic. "Do you understand the people behind those contracts?" "You mean the cops in the group chat?" Mike asked, almost gently. Rachel's eyes narrowed. She didn't know Mike. She didn't like not knowing. "I don't recall inviting the driver into this discussion." "Funny," Mike said, "because you invited his van into a chase." The waitress dropped 3 waters that sweated onto paper coasters. The ice popped like a small argument. Rachel kept playing her part. "Look," she said, "take the envelope. We can wire tonight." Her hand curled under the table. Mike watched, because hands tell the truth when mouths won't. He heard Emily swallow. He thought about how many times he had been offered money to be quiet. He thought about hospital bills he hadn't paid, the rent he had negotiated down by fixing the landlord's Honda, the way the world made the word generous into a weapon. "Another coffee?" the waitress asked, hovering because good waitresses hover when the air gets sharp. "Please," Mike said. He smiled at her, small, to say thank you for the cover. Emily put both hands on the table. "No," she told Rachel. "Simple. I'm done being a nice version of me." Rachel's jaw flexed. The diamond threw light again. The deputy at the counter fidgeted with his straw. Sarah pressed record under the table. The red light reflected in her pupils themselves. "Listen carefully," Rachel said, lower now, like truth is best whispered. "If you walk back in that hotel with me right now, this is a story. If you don't, this is a problem. We can solve stories. Problems?" She lifted her eyes to Mike. "Problems get solved for you." She would later claim she meant, "We'll help." She didn't. He put his cap back on. "We're done," he said to Emily. "Ready?" Emily's nod looked like courage, wearing a bad tremor. She stood. She didn't take the envelope. She didn't take the bait. Inset. Sarah's clip hit the Gazette's site exactly 7 minutes later under a headline that sounded like a question and read like a dare. Bridesmaid offers quiet cash as runaway bride mentions felony contracts. It wasn't elegant. It was true. Shares outpaced sleep. By dawn, the Fairmont's PR team had sent something polished and pointless. Jackson sent a note on letterhead, the kind with golf club embossing, and 3 verbs that said, "We deny, we care, we reserve." He wore a navy blazer on a private video where he pronounced misunderstanding in a way that made the vowels look expensive. He smiled into the front-facing camera like it was a mirror he had trained to love him back. Mike didn't watch. He had a van to keep alive, and a woman in his passenger seat who needed a nap that sleep was too spooked to give. He drove east, past hay bales and lone live oaks that had survived 3 droughts and a football team. He thought about the first time he had told the truth and how it had been used to draw a target on his shirt. He thought about the second time and how he had done it anyway. He pulled into the Gazette's parking lot, which was just a cracked rectangle of asphalt with faded numbers and a tang of cigarettes. The office inside hummed, with machines older than some interns. The receptionist glanced up and didn't flinch at his face, which put him on the verge of forgiving her for the last time she had. The LED lights glared like every conversation was an interrogation. A cheap, oscillating fan clicked at the same spot every rotation. He loved the sound because it meant no one had been promoted past fixing it. Sarah hugged him with one arm and set up tripods with the other. Her press badge was plastic and crimped. She wore sneakers because heels hide nothing. "You ready?" she asked. "No," he said. He glanced at Emily. Emily nodded like a person who had chosen her word and liked it. "Yes." The newsroom had a corner where a TV that never turned off gave people their reflection with the news. Sarah set Emily in front of it because sometimes you use a mirror to show people themselves. She gave Emily a legal pad with 3 bullet points. What we saw, what we know, what we want. It wasn't a speech. It was a flashlight. Emily read. Her voice shook at hello. It steadied at contracts. It lifted at wire transfers. It dropped to a register you could build a floor out of at recordings. She didn't look at herself on the TV. She looked at the camera like it was a friend of a friend who might finally listen. "What do you want?" Sarah asked at the end, because journalism is a tunnel with a right question at the far end. Emily looked up. "Investigations," she said. "Not just by whoever shakes hands with him at charity balls." She took a breath. A way out for people who signed things to keep jobs, because fear makes you complicit. But it's not the same as guilty. She swallowed. "And I want this." She touched the flash drive at the hem of the hoodie. "To stop being mine. It belongs to whoever protects people for real." Mike watched the comments start like rain. Then he watched them get heavy enough to matter. It wasn't the trolls, it was the quiet ones. A teacher wrote, "I saw the man's vans making late-night stops at the charter school when I cleaned desks." A night shift nurse wrote, "He paid my cousin to run errands in a marked car." A former intern typed, "They had us rehearse coincidental meetings with prospective sellers." Cops read too. Not the ones who liked handrests. The ones whose sisters had started looking at them different when they put the uniform on. A detective whose tires had been cut for poking the wrong glass house sent Sarah a wink and a leak. The Texas AG's office had assigned a pair of lawyers who weren't golfing buddies to look. You could feel something tilt. Jackson didn't go quiet. Men like him think silence is for people, not for them. He called. He offered to donate to the Gazette. He attempted to get the Gazette's landlord to enforce fire codes. He sent private security in polo shirts with arms that never bend. He expected doors to open because they always had. They didn't. Not all of them. At noon, the sheriff held a press conference under lights that faded every face into the same square jaw. He said the words ongoing and allegations and no one is above the law in a cadence that suggested he'd said other things like them before and not meant them either. But when a question came about the video in the diner, he didn't shrug it off. "We've seen it," he said. "We'll be talking to Miss Hale." He said, "Miss, not Mrs." It mattered. The takeoff felt strange, like turbulence that you wanted. In the background, Mike's life didn't pause politely. A woman called because her Honda made a noise like a fork in a garbage disposal. A man yelled because his truck wasn't done when he wanted it. His landlord left a voicemail that began, "Hey buddy," and ended, "You know how it is." He ate a ham sandwich like a firefighter eats a granola bar between explosions. Quick, grateful, unromantic. He checked the van and saw a slow leak on the rear driver's tire where a screw had done what screws do: hold and then betray. He jacked it up while a TV inside the Gazette said "breaking a lot" with the same font they used for sports scores. He lowered it back down into a world that had not yet changed. Inset. A junior associate in Jackson's office stared at her inbox where 2 emails glowed like coals. One was from legal, saying hold. The other was from someone using a Proton mail address saying you can breathe now. She didn't. Not yet. They held a town hall in the evening at the community college auditorium because the courthouse lobby felt too official to be trusted, and the hotel ballroom felt like a trap. The room's LED lights made everybody look a little tired. Folding chairs made little squeals on the floor. Someone brewed coffee that turned bitter as it cooled. People streamed in with faces the city used every day and never named. Mike stood at the back, like a man waiting his turn in a line that had made him invisible for years. He didn't want the stage. He wanted the sound of a calm truth landing. Sarah opened. She thanked people without fawning. She ran through the facts like a paramedic reads through vitals. Then, she stepped aside, and the reporters from bigger places, who had been messy in their hunger earlier, tried to relearn how to eat with fork and knife. Emily walked out. She didn't wear white. She wore jeans and a sweater that had seen better machine cycles. She set the flash drive on the podium like a stone you put on a grave because you don't have flowers. "Yesterday," she said, and the room went quiet, like rooms do when a person speaks, like the microphone is optional. "Yesterday I realized I had mistaken control for safety, that I had thought proximity to power would make me untouchable." She glanced at the drive. It didn't. A stranger did. Eyes turned to the back. Mike felt a heat behind his neck that wasn't shame. He looked at his shoes. His laces needed replacing. She said names. She didn't say them like curses. She said the job titles they held, and the decisions they made, and the kids those decisions touched. She said cops' names when she had to, and said some cops with care when she didn't. She asked for things simple as water, audits, subpoenas, protection for people who would bring work emails into the light. The room didn't clap at the end because it wasn't a finish line. It was an opening. Then they clapped anyway, because sometimes you applaud the beginning to give it courage. Jackson came in late. He waited until the cameras could catch him slipping through the door. He wore no tie, his shirt open at the neck to signal humanity. He didn't take a seat. He stood near the aisle and folded his arms, and smiled like someone who knew how the third act went. A man at the mic asked him a question he wasn't expecting. "How many times have you told someone to be reasonable?" Jackson chuckled. You could see him recalibrate the charm, goose it up a few notches. "Folks," he said, "let's not forget who I am in this community." He went on about jobs, about donations, about the time he funded Little League uniforms. It was paint on wet wood. It slid. Another person asked about an LLC that held more rental houses than the city's patients. Another asked about a developer who had parked a bulldozer next to a daycare. Someone else asked nothing and held up a sign that said, "Listen." That last one mattered. He lost his smile in increments, the way a man loses his hearing. He tried a threat with a soft edge. He tried a joke that fell like a pop fly. He reached for a phone in his pocket and let the gesture tell more truth than his mouth did. The deputy Sarah had clocked in the diner the night before, walked over and murmured something. The crowd didn't hush, but it looked at the murmuring like it deserved a subtitle. Jackson shook his head. No, then yes. Then folded his arms further. It wasn't a raid. It wasn't handcuffs. It wasn't TV. It was a paper. A simple one. The end of impression. He took it like it was a drink of water he didn't want. He left like a man who had just remembered an appointment and wanted you to think that made him important. No one stood up for him because standing is sometimes the loudest part. The next day, the Gazette lobby sprouted a square you could see through. A glass cube on a walnut table that someone had polished with lemon pledge. Inside sat a cheap metal flash drive on a museum mount, the plastic scuffed by a life. Next to it lay a cracked plastic ride-share lanyard with MIKE in block letters, rubbed half away, and a little grease fingerprint in the corner that had made it through 2 baths. A placard read, "The Things That Turned It." The letters were vinyl and slightly crooked. Mike preferred that. Perfect things make him nervous. "They asked for my old shirt," he told Sarah. He held it, the faded blue polo from a company that used to have his time and his hope. He rubbed the embroidered logo with his thumb until threads lifted. "Put the lanyard," he said. "Not the shirt." "Why?" Sarah asked. "Because this is what people saw and still didn't see me," he said. "Let 'em see it now." They did something else, too. They took the glassed-in conference room where the Gazette taught high school kids how to pull records and renamed it the Carter Room, because names are also a manual. The plaque was small. The point wasn't the font. A public defender came by and left a legal pad on the table with the words, "If you're scared, we'll walk in with you," written in a hand like patience. On the wall, they hung a photo of Emily's hand on the flash drive. Not Emily's face, because faces turn into stories. Hands turn things. The fall wasn't clean. It never is. Jackson hired better lawyers. He hired PR that made the first PR look like interns. He found a podcast that let him cry on a couch about betrayal. Some people believed him because money buys more than real estate. He got smaller anyway, like a shirt after a hot wash. His calls stopped sounding like orders and started sounding like he'd swallowed a whistle. Rachel pled to something with a number. She cried at the sentence and looked for Mike in the room. He wasn't there. He was changing brake pads for a teacher who needed a car that stopped when she asked it to. Corinne, the manager from 10 years ago, gave an affidavit that used the word misrepresentation like it had learned to stand up. A cop transferred. A detective found a new partner. A junior staffer at the AG's office didn't roll their eyes when the Gazette called. A night nurse's cousin got his job back. A landlord stopped raising rent just because the market is hot. Small things, without a press release, but you could feel the city's shoulders loosen a notch like a belt after a long meal. People asked Mike to speak, to students, to chambers, to churches with coffee that knew how to be both strong and kind. He said yes twice, no 5 times. He liked wrenches. He liked that bolts turn the way they're cut to turn. He wore the same boots he always wore with the leather worn shiny where the clutch hit. He stood at the back of rooms when he wasn't needed and near the front only when he was. He bought new laces. He painted over the graffiti on the back wall of his shop where someone had written thief during the worst week of his younger life. He didn't paint it clean. He left a ghost of it because erasing is not the same as learning. He added a sign that said, in small letters, "Keep it moving, keep it honest." He saw Emily sometimes, not always on purpose. Twice at the plant stand at the farmer's market, where the basil made the air smell like kitchens that remember laughter. Once at the DMV, where the numbers rolled slow and everyone's patience was a test. Once at HEB, aisle 12, where salsa is and everything else that makes a week tolerable. They didn't become a romance. They became a respect that liked to sit quietly. She cut her hair shorter and wore less apology. She moved to a rental that didn't vibrate when the neighbors shut doors. She studied for a certification in paralegal work because her brain liked paper done right. They went to a taco truck one night because hunger is not an ideology. They leaned on the warm hood of his van and ate al pastor with too much onion and just enough lime. He watched the grease move on the foil like a topography. She wiped a dot of red from his chin with a napkin, like a friend who was allowed to. A song from 10 years ago played too loud from someone else's car. It made him think of being 24 and too sure. It made him grateful for being older and less neat. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "Knowing what's next?" He laughed. "I never knew what's next," he said. "I just think I did." A breeze came off the river and made the napkins try to escape. He held them down with his palm. The food truck man shouted an order that sounded like a prayer. Across the street, a bus hissed to a stop, and a kid jumped down the steps, holding his backpack like it would grow wings if he loosened his grip. Somewhere else, in a lobby far more expensive, a donor plaque got an extra name scratched off with a solution that smells like grapefruit and denial. A woman in an office deleted a contact and felt her shoulders rise from a posture she had thought permanent. A man in a chair realized he hadn't gripped the armrests in an hour and smiled for the first time without asking if it was permitted. Mike drove home with the windows down because the van's AC quit sometimes when the night got tender. The smell of cut grass caught in the cab and made him think of aught summers and mothers who made laundry smell like sunshine. He parked in the back, the spot he always took even when the front was open because habit can be a kind of kindness to yourself. He went inside. The apartment held the day's heat like a grudge. He opened the freezer and let it wash his face. He laughed at himself, at the posture of it, at how human it felt to flirt with an appliance. He took the lanyard that used to hang on a hook by the door and reached for it before remembering where it sits now, in a glass cube under cold light. He looked at the empty spot on the wall and didn't feel empty. He pinned a small photo there instead, a Polaroid Sarah took of his hands on the wheel, knuckles up, city lights reflected in the windshield like a constellation you don't have to name to recognize. He slept the kind of sleep that starts on the couch because you didn't mean to and is better for it. Weeks turned into a rhythm, not a parade, a tempo. He fixed. He drove less because fixing felt like a sentence that ends up the right way. He kept the Doritos bag trick because no trick stops being useful just because you got lucky once. He bought new spark plugs. He stacked them on a shelf in a neat line because neat lines make chaos argue with itself. He went by the Gazette some afternoons when his hands were too clean and he needed newsprint. The cube gleamed. People stopped and stared at the little drive like it held something holy. It didn't. It held something heavy. A choice someone made, then another, then the final one, to hand it away. That's all anybody ever does, he thought. Hand away what they're done carrying. He liked that the cube didn't make the lanyard look fancy. It made it look small and therefore possible. If you asked him later what part of the whole thing stuck, he'd say it was the sound of Emily's finger tapping the plastic of the flash drive when she was scared. Tap, tap, tap. A heartbeat you can make yourself. He started hearing it in other places, his own finger on a desk as a customer told a story that wanted to be longer than the invoice. The click of a ratchet as it found the right tooth, the tick of a hazard light when someone pulled over because they were tired of running. "Keep it moving," he'd say out loud sometimes in the quiet, and he'd hear the new version of it in his head, the one that added a word without making a fuss. He got a letter once, months after the night that turned. It was on cheap paper, and the handwriting sat awkwardly on the lines, like it hadn't practiced. It said, "I was the valet who took the plates photo. I'm sorry. He put it in the drawer with the Altoids tin and the other little things that make a life. He didn't write back because he didn't know where, but he made a point of tipping valets in 20s for a while, even when they didn't expect it. Because mercy is sometimes a contagion, it's okay to spread. He still ran into cops. He still felt his body alter shape when they tailed him 2 blocks for no reason. He still put his hands where hands were supposed to go. But once, one of them recognized him. "Carter?" the cop said, low. Mike tensed until the cop added, "My sister. She said thanks." It was a sentence that didn't fit the uniform well. It fit the man fine. Mike nodded once. They drove in different directions, and both of them exhaled after. He kept the van. He thought about trading it for something quieter, something with Bluetooth that didn't disconnect when you closed the glove box. But he liked the way the Econoline told him what it needed. He did upgrade the stereo, though. Sometimes you need better sound when the night is long. If you were looking for a triumphal flourish, a ribbon, an end card with perfect typography, you didn't get it. You got a city that learned a new habit. It looked up when men like Jackson smiled. It asked 2 more questions. It stopped assuming the driver's story began at the curb. The Fairmont's doors still spun. Donor walls still gleamed. But somewhere between the neon and the oak trees, people started living in the meantime with slightly more care. You can tell if an engine's timing is off by the way it shakes at idle. You correct it by degrees, not with a crowbar. He thought about that every time someone asked him to play hero for a narrative that needed a cape. He had wrenches. He had time. He had 2 rules. He added a third. Promises are noise. Follow-through is the signal.